My name is Jasmine, and today I will be reflecting on death and rebirth. This is a part of the 12 Days of Yule challenge that was created by Ivy the Occultist. As some of you may already know, I experienced a loss 2 days ago. This only makes creating this video that much more important for me. I do want to touch on different types of death because I've experienced a variety of these this past year. Beginning with physical death. As some of you may know if you've been following my channel, one of my cousins passed away a couple of months ago. I made a video with how I was feeling only hours after it occurred, so feel free to check that out if you'd like. And then I think it was only a few videos after that I made a video on anticipatory grief in regards to my dog, my fur baby Rocky. His kidneys were failing, so we knew it was only a matter of time before he left us. This had us in a weird place, in this limbo, because of course we wanted him to get better, but we also knew that we were already providing end-of-life care. Just as I have shared previously in the anticipatory grief video, the only thing I truly wanted out of this situation was for him to not suffer unnecessarily. I wanted his transition to be a smooth one, and I wanted him to be as pain-free as possible until his last breath. I feel very grateful that this was the case. We did have pain medication on hand, ready, if it did get to the point where he started feeling pain, but luckily he did not. The day that he passed, we knew he was going to pass, and that provided us some time to prepare. We used a black taper candle that we lit and placed next to him the night that he passed to help guide him. And sure enough, he passed before the candle was out. His last few breaths, he took them in good company with those he loved the most, my younger sister and I. When he passed, we soon felt the absence of his energy. This was an extremely bittersweet moment for me because it was a reminder that he was gone, but it was also a confirmation that he wasn't going to linger because he had unfinished business, and this brought me great comfort. And although Rocky has left us, the lessons he bestowed on us are not forgotten. Yesterday morning, my dad spoke with my sister and I, and he thanked us. He thanked us for taking care of Rocky in the way that we did, because he saw that no matter how hard it got, we were going to keep trying to make him as comfortable as possible, and we were going to provide him with the most love and care that we could. Later that evening, I asked my spiritual team to join me in doing a tarot reading for my pet. The message that I received was so beautiful, and it was only confirming what I already knew, which was that he had fully transitioned. This also provided me more comfort because it showed me, even though I already knew, it showed me that my spiritual team has got my back. Now I'd like to transition the focus to metaphorical death. And this can simply be seen as the death of anything that isn't physical. I'm specifically going to talk about a relationship death, which in my case was a friendship since childhood. It was a familial bond. Well, it still is now. But during the time that this took place, it felt very permanent. This relationship, friendship death, was a result of over a decade's worth of lacking to set necessary boundaries on both parts. And this toxic dynamic worked for as long as it did because when someone is in survival mode, they are just going to cling on to whatever they can to get through and survive. And if that is a person who likes to be the one that can help, that can try to make someone else's life better, then you have the perfect recipe for a toxic relationship. And this is not just true for friendships, of course, also for romantic relationships. If someone is in desperate need for something and somebody can fulfill that need, well, there you go. However, I am so glad that present day, I can say, we have since rebirthed this friendship. We are still taking it day by day and have had extensive conversations around everything in the past that we were not okay with that resulted in a toxic dynamic. And it is definitely a work in progress. But that's what all relationships should be. There is no end point because as human beings, we are constantly changing. And the way that we grow, maybe in a very different path or in a different way than our friends or significant others. And that's okay. It's simply part of the cycle. All death, whether it's the little deaths that occur throughout our life or the big death, those are unavoidable. And learning to surrender to death when it is your loved one's time to go is difficult. But it also allows for a smoother transition and for our loved ones to not feel like they have unfinished business that they need to stick around for. As witches, we have the accessibility to be able to work with and communicate with our ancestors, our mighty dead, our deceased loved ones. This leads me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about: the reconnection with my great grandmother, my mom's grandmother. I have spoken about her a few times before on this channel. She is one of the ancestors that I work with heavily, and this work is not limited to just asking her for guidance or asking her to help me in workings or other mundane things. I learned about her through the stories that my mother and grandmother would share with me growing up. I learned from them that she was a birth worker, that she was an herbalist, and she was the closest thing to an actual doctor that they had in the small town that they grew up in. The entirety of my grandmother's story I will share at another time. But what I will share now is this. When my mom was closer to the age of 10, she recalls seeing my grandmother walk around the house doing chores and noticing that she was always pulling at her dress or seeming to try to tuck something in. Later, my mom came to find out that it was my great grandmother's prolapsed uterus. When I first found this out, it made me sad and also a bit confused because she was a birth worker, she was a healer. Why did she have this happen to her? Was she not taking care of herself? And it just increased my curiosity so much to the point that I started writing to my great grandmother. And of course, the conclusion that I came to was that so much of the time, when we focus on trying to help others, we neglect ourselves. And this made me sad and mad because it was a reminder of this familial curse where a lot of what we give is simply taken for granted or is never returned or reciprocated. I decided to journey to the upper world and talk to my great grandmother. I wasn't sure how this was going to result, but it was something that I just knew that I had to do. In this journey, when I get to the place where she is supposed to be, I find a very sickly older lady. She was so frail and weak. In this journey, I nursed her back to health. I spoke to her and told her things about my mother, her granddaughter, and my grandmother, her daughter. I felt that we had so much in common and that it was my duty to care for them in her place because she wasn't there to do so. Then I got this message that felt like a warning. The need to make sure that I was healthy and that I wasn't pouring from an empty cup, or I would suffer a similar fate that she had, dying much younger than she should have and with ill health. After I cried for a good while, the spiders that had brought me to her began to help me weave a webbing that would serve to keep her cervix in place and from falling out. At first, this spider thread that created the webbing was white, but then as I continued to weave with the spider, it became a red yarn type of material. My great grandmother looked so grateful. She then began to age in reverse. She did this until she looked like she was in her mid-20s to me. She was wearing a 1950s sundress. The sundress changed colors from red to yellow and then back to red again. And then her surroundings seemed to turn into her own paradise. She was smiling and happy. It was time for me to leave. I understand that journeying or working in the astral or visiting the other world may not be something that everyone is comfortable with, but it does provide a very different experience with death. Working with the death current or working with the death moon, which for me is the day that the moon reaches 0% illumination. This has given me not only more understanding for the role of death in life, but it has also provided me with power and strength to keep living in conjunction with death, not running away from it. It was through opening myself up to work with the current of death that I was taken to my first deity. Now that origin story, I will wait to share for the Spirits of Yule prompt that is coming up in a few days. I will end this video by encouraging you all to use death as a way to give you the courage to move towards those things that you truly want. To really think about how we can learn from all of these deaths, whether they be metaphorical or physical, so that we can experience a rebirth. Thank you for listening.